told you there's a clinician who didn't just leave medicine, but built something so valuable that investors gave her millions. And then she chose to walk away from it on purpose. Not because it failed, but because it worked. Today's guest went from practicing dermatology to raising venture capital to scaling a company globally and making an intentional and strategic exit. She now sits at the table advising CEOs running companies that deal with $10 to $100 million in a year. And here's the most important part. She didn't do it overnight. She didn't quit her job on a whim. And she's about to dismantle some of the biggest lies clinicians believe about entrepreneurship. Like why just go ahead and start the business is terrible advice. Why most entrepreneurs waste time building things that no one buys. And why the freedom that everyone is chasing might actually be an illusion. If you've ever thought, there has to be more than this, or what would it look like to practice medicine electively? This episode is going to challenge how you think about careers, money, entrepreneurship, and what's actually possible. Because this isn't just a story about leaving medicine. It's a masterclass in building something that works, in making high stakes decisions well, and designing a life where you are no longer stuck, but choosing to do what you love and be fulfilled. All right, let's dive in. Kasey, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tracy.
I'm really excited. I feel like in this space, you are one of those entrepreneurs that people point to and say, like, look, she's doing it. And not only is she doing it right now, she's been doing it for years and years before the rest of us figured out that this was an option. So, can you tell us a little bit about you, your clinical background, and how you first got into entrepreneurship?
Yes. So before I have a PA designation after my name. I have a master's that I got from USC. Before I did that, I started in wholesale pharmaceutical sales. So I like to just add that as part of my backstory because I think that was, at the time I didn't realize that planted some seeds. In a startup company in Miami, wholesale pharmaceutical sales, and I built the first territory with outside sales in the local market, and then expanded to LA. I did become a PA in 2003. I practiced dermatology for 20 years in Santa Monica, California, and expanded that practice. And along the way, like many of us, got into some management responsibilities in the practice, like many PAs do. Sort of a common path for those of us that self-proclaim ourselves as natural-born leaders. And my mentor at the time was a very savvy business person and taught me a lot about cash flow of a business. And in doing that, I realized at that point how small businesses operate, whether it's a medical practice or any other business. And we started consulting for other PAs, physicians, small private practices on compensation plans. I started that in 2009. I still have that business to today. It's a passion based business of mine. I believe wholeheartedly in supporting other small private practices, but beyond that, I got the entrepreneur bug for a bigger venture, and I started another company. I raised some capital and a couple $1 million in capital and took that company global, made an exit in 2020. And I've since retired from clinical care, and now I focus on leadership development. And I'm a strategic advisor for people that want to grow, pivot, or exit in their entrepreneurial journey, right? In their business journey. So it could be a founder, could be a CEO. I work a lot with family owned businesses, founder led businesses that are deciding if they're going to grow, pivot, or exit. And I speak a lot on the high stakes decisions that we have to make when we're navigating either a career shift, a business shift, or a major life change that is impacting the decision. And that's what I do now, even though I still have my other business, my medical consulting business as well. I don't have the bigger venture was a skincare business, and that I have sold.
Fascinating. And aren't we all growing, pivoting, or getting ready to exit at some point, right? We're going to leave where we are currently, whether that's one clinical job for another, whether it's clinical medicine for entrepreneurship. Like that describes everyone at every phase, right? We're either growing into the role that we're in, we're thinking about changing from that role to another role, or we're thinking, hey, this doesn't feel the way that I thought it would, or my needs have changed, right? Life has changed and I have grown. And sometimes it's that we outgrow the job, not the other way around. So, talk to me about that pivot for you where you decided to sort of hang up. I want to say stethoscope, but I guess it's the dermatoscope, right? When you when you were leaving dermatology and deciding, "Hey, I'm going to stop practicing clinically and, put all my eggs in the basket of entrepreneurship and doing this consulting and running these businesses."
Yeah. So I started the first business in 2009, the second business in 2010. I was practicing clinically at that time, and I was expanding the clinical practice as well and managing it. So I was basically the chief of staff for the medical practice, had two of my other businesses, and my patient profile was a bit unique because of the Los Angeles demographic. So my patients were a lot of celebrities, high profile attorneys, politicians. So I was having to do television set visits. I was having to really adapt my personal time for my patients' needs. So while that sounds very glamorous on the outside, um I always want to be real with people because the story is, it sounds wonderful when I tell it in 1 minute, but it's not. Those times when you try to do it all, like those of us that we're overachievers, right? Lots of us in medical profession, we're overachievers, we're trying to do everything ourselves. And in doing that, there was a massive, burnout factor that I can't be here for the patients, be here for the practice and for the team that I'm building, expand the medical practice, grow two businesses, and have a healthy relationship with my husband and family, right? And so there was a very dark time. Oh, and not to mention shareholders and investors, right? So I had all these responsibilities. So, like many of us in medicine, we feel that pressure from multiple sources. So we have the pressure from patient care, delivering the best quality of care, patients to the clinic where we're, responsibility to the clinic and responsibility to our family, and then to ourselves. How are we keeping ourselves mentally healthy and physically healthy? So, initially when I started recognizing that, I reduced my clinical time to part time, and I adjusted some things with my team with expansion. I put one of my businesses on what I call a simmer. So most people don't realize that when you're on an entrepreneurial journey, every business goes through a growth, a coast, or a contraction stage. And that's a healthy part of business. You're not always growing. You can look on Instagram or YouTube, you're gonna see this line graph that goes up, but that's not reality. The reality is any business is facilitating a little bit. It's sort of going like this, it's vacillating, and then it's slowly going up, right? So you want to intentionally grow your business with there's some key ways you grow a business. And sometimes you coast when you're restructuring operations, and sometimes you actually contract. So when I made some decisions about clinical care, I put clinical care part-time. I took my medical consulting business and I contracted it way down. And I put the energy on the business that at that time I committed a 10-year period. Now, another mistake that most people make is they don't start a business with the end in mind. My biggest venture had a very clear end in mind. It was a 10-year plan with a specific exit. COVID impacted our exit, unfortunately, from a financial standpoint. However, we had a very specific time exit. And I encourage everybody, when you start a business, you always want to know what the end game is. Are you going to sell it? Is it going to be a legacy business you hand down? Are you going to wind it down? In which case, you're going to build the infrastructure a little differently depending on what the exit is. So, to answer your question in a long-winded way, I went from full-time to part-time clinical care, and then eventually in 2020, I had to make some big changes logistically for personal reasons, because I live on two coasts and it was COVID and you couldn't travel, and my clinical practice was LA. I was living in Chicago and my family is on the East Coast. So I took a sabbatical at first, and then it turned into a retirement from clinical care.
It's so important that we talk about the fact that very rarely is someone a full time practicing clinician who gets an idea, hangs it up completely, and puts all their eggs in the entrepreneur basket, hoping that it's going to work out and generate revenue, because most people need to make money, right? Most people are not practicing medicine electively just for fun because we just love current corporate healthcare, right? Most people need to have an off ramp, need to have that step down, that scale down to part time, ramp up the business. So I really appreciate your transparency with, like, yeah, I didn't quit the day I got the idea.
Correct. Correct. It was a 10-year transition from full-time to part-time, and then a sabbatical that I was going to give myself the option to come back for after a period of time, and then decided to retire.
Do you miss the practice of clinical medicine now that you are down the road from that transition?
I miss the patients. I miss the social aspect. In dermatology, we have the privilege of making people feel good. And so I miss that. I miss seeing people that I got to see their kids grow up or see them getting ready for a milestone event, whether it was a wedding or a graduation, or they had some big event and they wanted to look amazing. And so whether it was aesthetic medicine or whether it was, they had suffering from acne or rosacea or whatever their skin condition might be, I miss that part of it. I think that, obviously corporate medicine, no, obviously battling insurances, I don't miss that, right? And then some of the logistics, for me, I have a couple of different homes. I live in multiple places. And so to be physically in one location is challenging for me at this point.
What made you feel, as someone who was out there just sort of minding her own business, practicing medicine in this practice, that you were qualified and capable to do some of this, what sounds like really high level consulting and going into other practices and saying to other CEOs or physician founders, hey, here's what you're not doing well, and here's what you could be doing better?
Yeah, I think it's the old saying, like, we have a medicine, right? See one, do one, right? So I learned from my mentor about business and how to set up a business efficiently. I collaborated with a PA colleague of mine in her clinical practice, and I beta tested, right, some of these concepts. Like, hey, what if you tried this in your practice? And she and I bounced ideas off of each other, and we were like, this works. So we actually collaborated together for the first consulting business. And before we took it to market, we made sure that we had tested it in a couple of different practices. And we thought, this, we recognized an opportunity. We thought, our PA colleagues certainly do not know business, and most of our physician colleagues do not either. And so when people are structuring compensation plans, most of the time they're going about it from a salary report, or they're comparing to colleagues down the street, and that's not the appropriate way if you want a healthy business to structure compensation plans. So that's what we educate on, and we help people understand how to do that, that's healthy for the practice, and then find the right provider that aligns with the goals of that practice, and then it's a win-win for everybody.
I can't tell you how many times I have discussed with surgeon colleagues of mine how they decided what to pay people, and they literally say, "Well, I called up one colleague who employs a PA in a different area of the country in a different specialty, and I asked them, 'Hey, what do you pay your PA?' And then I just sort of made it up."
Yeah, that's what people do. That's what people do. And you're like, how do you know that this is healthy for your business? Like, it's this, there's a percentage that makes sense for businesses to function, for compensation, for operational expenses, right? And so, and for some of their overhead. So it has to make sense for the business side. And so it doesn't mean that every opportunity is not the right opportunity for every medical provider. It's not all only a financial decision, right? It's a lifestyle decision. It's whether you have call or not call, right? There's so many factors. But yeah, compensations has been a big pet peeve of mine, should never be based on a phone call to a colleague, another practice, or a salary report.
We have to do better than that, right? We have to have a better idea, both as business owners and then also as the clinician, right? We have to know that we likely know more about what PAs are making, right? And that we know what we're worth. And, so the other side of that coin is like really having a solid understanding of the value that you're adding to the practice. So, I would like to go back and really shine a light on something that you said, which was, hey, before we took this to market, before we started charging people for this, we checked to see if it would work. We beta tested it. We tried it in different practices in different settings to make sure that it didn't just work for us, right? It didn't just work for derm. It didn't just work for a specific specialty or setting. Can you talk to me more? Because a lot of clinician entrepreneurs have a great idea that they build the thing all the way and then they think to ask, is anyone looking for this? Is anyone willing to buy this? Is there a market for this?
Yeah, biggest mistake every entrepreneur makes is building the product first, right? Without testing the market. So, I've started three of my own businesses. All of them I beta tested the product or the service first. before bringing anything to market. So that is by far the biggest mistake that anybody makes. I sit on the board for the University of Miami Launchpad, which is their entrepreneur program. And with the students, whether it's grad students, alumni, faculty, advising people on starting and growing their businesses. And by far, the number one mistake across the board, unanimously, no matter what room I'm in, is that people want to build their program or product before they determine if there is interest. And so that is really critical no matter what you're doing. You have to determine that it works. Number one, it's good and it works. And number two, that there is interest for it, that there isn't, it's not too much competition, it's not overly saturated. You know, how you're going to price it is it has adequate margins, that you've done adequate market research to determine there is market fit and market demand for this program or service. And so, you know, for those of us that are practicing medicine, we're so busy seeing patients. You get a great idea. You're like, I'm going to build this thing because it's great. It's going to solve a problem. It might solve your problem, but is it going to solve enough people's problems? And is there no other competition out there? And is it going to be cost effective for you to be able to market it? Those are all really critical questions when you're starting out.
Early on in my entrepreneurial journey, I did that so many times. It took me a really long time to figure out all ideas are good ideas, but not all ideas are profitable products that the market wants, right? So it's not that those ideas were terrible, it's just that you can build something incredible and the people need something different, right? Or those people need something else that they need to learn before they're ready for that thing, right? So that market research will save you so much time and energy and heartbreak that you've built it. Like it's not if you build it, they will come.
Definitely. Yes, definitely not. If you build it, you can pray they'll come, but I don't know. Yeah. If you're lucky.
So, talk to the listener who has caught their own entrepreneurial bug and is sort of has an idea. How do they validate it in the market? Is it a good idea? How do we know what competition is out there? Am I qualified to make it? Will this even help people? How do we answer some of those questions and overcome some of those doubts?
You know, I think that, you know, when we come from medicine, what happens is we are analytical. And so we're very process oriented. We're very analytical. We're really good at making things. We're good problem solvers. What some of our weak areas are is business, sales, and marketing. But in order to bring a product to market, you really need to have those three in place. And so, you know, if you have an idea for something, that definitely does not necessarily mean it's going to be a successful business, right? So you have to figure out if there is a need for it in the market, and again, figure out if you're going to have a margin for it. And margin meaning, you know, you have to mark up your product or service, you know, typically depending on the industry, but it's going to be like a 5 times, could be a 9 times, right? And so, you know, a lot of people get in the mistake if they're making a physical product, right? You have these glasses and you're like, I can make these glasses for $10. I'm going to sell them for $20. That is not how it works. That's not enough margin. You don't have anything by the time you spend $10 to make them, you sell it for 20. Now you have 10 in your hand. You have to go buy more to replace your inventory. You have not paid for any business, marketing, sales, people, team, insurance, infrastructure, legal, etc. So that's a huge mistake that people make with the physical product is they underestimate what they're going to need to price it at, and then they can do some market research to compare. Now, when you're doing something that is service focused, which is my preferred business model, is service focused over product service. I've done both, but I prefer service based businesses. There's a little bit more of a gray zone because there's less overhead. Obviously, you're talking about your time, or you're hiring some. I call them implementers, the doers, the people that are going to deliver the service for you. So you might have the idea for the service, somebody else is going to deliver it. Maybe it's going to be a technology, an app, something like that. So then there's a little bit more variation in how you're going to price it. But no matter what, you have to determine if there's market. So you have to get out there and do some market research, do some surveys, social media surveys, partner up with some people that have your ideal audience on a social, and do some questions, so have them do an email blast. You know, you're gonna have to invest a couple dollars potentially to get some data and some information to validate your idea and make sure that there is an interest for it, a demand for it, it's going to solve a need, and in what the market will bear for pricing to make sure it's going to be worth your while and be profitable for you.
Yeah. What do you feel like is I feel like this is a masterclass in entrepreneurship. So I'm just like taking notes over here. I'm like, okay, the first biggest mistake is that we build the product first before testing the market. What's the second biggest mistake that entrepreneurs are making?
Oh god, oh my goodness. Okay, the second biggest mistake is not starting with the end in mind. That you have to know what the end game is. It's critical. You have to know, is this something that is going to be built to sell? Because if you're going to do it that way, you structure it extremely differently. What do I mean by that? If you're going to sell the business one day, it means that there's a certain profit margin that is really important. There's a critical ratios that buyers look for. There is contact lists. There is intellectual property. There's things that increase your value when you're thinking about potentially selling something one day. If that is not your intention, if you're intending on handing it down to the next generation, or you're just going to wind it down, like it's going to generate income for you and your team, and it's going to be a great ride. And if you wind it down in the end, that's fine. Well, then you're going to structure it very differently. Then you don't necessarily need to have those other things in place because the end game, the end exit is going to be when you feel like retiring or winding it down, you will. And, you're going to invest personally in real estate, some of my other passion and my other things along the way. And so not having the end in mind, both what is your end goal, what your time frame is, and what your target financially is. That is the second biggest mistake because the decisions that you make along the way or will directly impact that long-term goal. So people, for example, when I work with clients, if they are thinking they're not necessarily going to exit, this is for them, maybe they're going to hand it down, then we're going to focus a lot more on what they're doing with that income. We're going to work with some wealth advisors and things on different investment strategies. We're not necessarily going to be looking to structure the business in just the perfect way that buyers look for.
Do you find that people start with the right now in mind or the middle in mind? Like they're looking for, because I feel like so many entrepreneurs are like, or clinicians who want to be entrepreneurs are like, you just have all this freedom. And I'm like, yes, but you don't have to go to work, 12-hour shifts anymore, but you're working for yourself. And I think boundaries in business are slipperier than boundaries in clinical work.
Okay. Yes. So this is a great question. So this is and this is a controversial topic that some people listening probably won't like my answer to this. I do not consider a one person business a business. I consider that a solopreneur working for the worst possible boss. So until you have a team, you are working for yourself. It is your own time, and you will never have time and freedom. So this is controversial because a lot of people will say, I'm a business owner. And I will say, how many people on your team? And they'll be like, it's just me. I say, you're a solopreneur. That's great. You're like a contractor, essentially. You are the one responsible for making the money. You're the one responsible for marketing, admin, all the things. You will never have time. And that's okay if you love what you do, that's totally fine. So the leadership work that I do with bigger CEOs, people that have businesses anywhere from 10 to 100 million, that's my time. I love doing it. I love helping them find fulfillment and joy in the journey. It is my time. There is no team doing that. That is on me because I love it and I'm passionate about it. I'm not going to sell my quote unquote personal brand. It's CaseyD'Amato.com. Like nobody wants that. It's my name, right? It's not a sellable. My leadership consulting is not a sellable business. It is me, my time. I love it, right? But I do have a team. I do have a team of 3 still, even on my leadership side. So for people who want freedom, that means your full-time job goes from clinical medicine to building your team. If you want freedom, that is your new job, is now finding, vetting, and building a cohesive team to deliver the service, build the product, build the marketing, and then you're going to build that business big enough that your, let's say, 20% profit margin becomes, that's where you're going to be paying yourself from. So be ready to what they call scale, right? To get to that stage. If you stay working solo or with, one assistant or something like that, you will always feel that internal struggle for the quote unquote freedom, the freedom that is an illusion. It's not real, by the way, it's not real, but you're shifting from being the service provider or the product maker to building the team. But building the team is a full-time job. Managing people is full-time. So don't get me wrong that you have all this freedom. You have a little more flexibility, I would say, when you have the team, not freedom. Yeah.
And so many people that I talk to want to be able to practice medicine electively, right? They want to get out from feeling trapped in this healthcare system where they don't get to choose, their schedule, where they don't get to choose their income, where they don't get to choose to travel and all of those things. And so I think that the internet has made digital nomad a thing, right? Like, oh, everyone's a digital nomad and everyone's coaching, this seven-figure coaching business from the beach in Tahiti. And you're like, are they? Like, correct. Like, no, they're not. Or they are in Tahiti, but they're running a team, and that also is work. Like, no one is out there working, 20 minutes from their phone a day.
Correct. It's not happening. That's not happening. No. If you want to do that, get into real estate. Real estate is the only game that I think you can play some of that. But if you're going into the digital space, no, you're not doing that. I've been in all the big masterminds with the biggest digital influencers, right? And they are busting their butts. They are not hanging out just eating bonbons on the beach. They're taking pictures on the beach and it's going all over Instagram and it looks really good, but they are working their tails off. And so, if you're going in thinking about a digital, coaching, consulting, teaching space, I like that space. I think you can do very well, but it is work. It is not. You can work from anywhere in the world, true, but it's still work.
Okay, if you could tell the 2003 new graduate PA Kasey anything, what would you tell that younger provider, budding entrepreneurial version of you?
There's really two. One is embrace failure much more than you ever thought you could, because entrepreneurship is about failures. The bigger the failure, the more successful you'll be. So that took me a very long time to learn. And the second is the philosophy that I call the three who's, is that at any given time, no matter where you are in the stage of the journey, you need to have a collection of three groups of people around you. That is at minimum of three people that are mentors, some in your industry, some outside, that have some wisdom around. They can see things that you can't because they've been there, some in your industry and some outside your industry that just have life wisdom. That's one set of who's. The other set of who's are people that are going through it with you. So if you are starting something new, or are you in an entrepreneur club or a Facebook group, or where are your colleagues where you can share resources and commiserate and share, right? And the third group of who's is the people that support you. This is your team at home and in work, both. So it could be family at home, or it could be, the small things like the housekeeper, or transportation for your kids, or grocery delivery. I never go to the market since COVID. That was the best thing. Since the grocery starting and deliver, I was like, look at this time saving. I never go to the market. It's rare. And so I have everything delivered, right? So all these cost saving things, who's working for you at home and who is working for you in your professional setting, that is freeing up your time to do the things that you do best. So 20% of your total time is the thing is are the things that you do best. You want that to be 100% of your time, and that everybody else is doing the minutia that is the stuff you dread and you're not that good at.
What an important reminder that there is so much of business that is outside your zone of genius, right? Whatever you're doing, whether you're the content creator or the ideator or the product producer, right? All of those things are incredible, but none of those products walk off the shelves, drive themselves to people's houses and show up on the door, right? There's so much that goes into the marketing, the delivery, the sales, the packaging, all of it, right? I literally everything except what you are doing is what, if you can, having that be outsourced to other people on your team or external consultants, like that's where that freedom actually comes from. That's where that flexibility is that everyone thinks. And it does sort of feel like it's hiding, right? Like people do the first two steps, right? They opt out of clinical medicine, they start the business, they're doing the thing, and then I think there's so many of us that falter in the final execution of that, really optimizing the impact that you can make and the income that you can make from entrepreneurship.
Right. Just don't try and do it all yourself. Like that is just one of the things, like you just trying to do everything. It's the, it's the, got back to the book, who, not how. If anybody's, if your audience hasn't read that book, I highly recommend it. Because it's not how you build your business, it's who you bring around you. And again, my philosophy is the three level of who's. That doesn't come from that book. That's my own theory, but that book is an awesome book, because it trains your brain to not try to learn all the skills. You're going to move so much faster if you partner, collaborate, hire, fill in whatever it makes sense for you, the person that knows how to do that thing. And so whether you hire them, whether you partner with them, whether you collaborate with them, that is going to be exponentially faster than trying to learn all the skills. So it is never about the how, it is always about the who. My biggest venture, that I took the company global, was a skincare company. And the reason that company went global was not because I figured out how to sell the product. I mean, it was a great product. Of course, I'm biased and I think it was a great product. But everyone thinks their products are great when you're an entrepreneur. But the reason that product had that level of reach, that we launched in Europe, South America, and Canada, is because we partnered with a company that already had international distribution, and they were looking for the type of product that we had, and they white labeled it under their brand name. So this wasn't me learning marketing or me learning sales. Quite the opposite. They took all my stuff off and slapped their name on, right? So it was the opposite of what you think. You think you're making this product and you need to master marketing and social media and sales, maybe, or maybe you find the right partner that is looking for that product, and that is the ticket to expand. And so the other book is 10x is better than 2x, is another one, that kind of helps train your brain to think that way, that it is not about the how and it's not about the 2x. It's about the who, and it's about 10xing your current situation.
All right, before we wrap up and you tell people where they can find you and learn from you, I would love for you to tell us how you feel like your life has changed from when you were practicing as a PA, running all over to see all these celebrity clients while running a business, while being the chief of staff of, of other places. How is your life different and hopefully better now than it was then?
I think I mentioned failure. And so everybody that has an entrepreneurial story has some significant failures. And mine is no different. So big failures, and those humble you for a moment. And when you come out on the other side, there's a level of humility, that is different. And there is a level of emotional intelligence, that a muscle of emotional intelligence that gets stronger and stronger and stronger every time you're resilient and you bounce back. So today, compared to 16 years ago, 17 years ago, when I first started as an entrepreneur, I think it's the emotional intelligence, the ability to understand the emotional state, how to control the emotional state, how to influence and impact others, whether it's team, community, clients, industry, right? And how to make database decisions. Those are the things that are significantly different and allow me to have a lot more fulfillment in my life experience, in my other, professional. I do a lot more philanthropy now. I give back a lot of my time to the University of Miami and their entrepreneur program. So I'm able to pay it forward, and I'm able to share not just the tactics of entrepreneurship, but how you change as a human in that evolutionary journey. And I think that is what is most different for me, is finding fulfillment and contribution and understanding the journey of the emotional intelligence, in the ride, and helping other people understand that that is the gift of entrepreneurship, is the joy in the ride.
Which is interesting because what the internet tells us is that it is what your life looks like, which we love to think about, when we look at other people's lives on social media, right? Like, oh, it looks so good. But what you're describing is the growth and the feeling, right? The growth and the fulfillment, the fact that I think entrepreneurship is the most wonderful and also expensive time consuming personal and professional development, right? Like you will learn things about yourself that you quite frankly did not want to know.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Be ready to look in the mirror and you don't always like what you see. Yes.
But I also feel like in that way, it mirrors the practice of medicine. Like there are so many things that the practice of medicine taught me and humbled me. And I feel similarly about the mistakes that I made in clinical care, like the almost big mistakes, right? Those never events, those almost things that you missed something or didn't realize something. And then some delightful nurse or colleague with more experience or more wisdom came along and saved you. And by saved you, I mean, saved your patient from a bad outcome, saved you from hurting someone. Those are the things that teach us things, those failures clinically, but also those failures from an entrepreneurial standpoint. Like those are the things you'll remember years later, right? Remember that one time, remember that. That's what you learn.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Exactly. That's right.
Awesome. So tell us where we can go to find, connect, learn from you, and engage with your services.
Yeah, so I am on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook, Kasey D'Amato on all three platforms. I put out a weekly blog. It's called In Your Corner. So it's for anybody that is a founder, CEO, president, or considers themselves a leader and wants to think a little different, who wants to grow both personally and professionally in their entrepreneurial journey. So you can subscribe to that blog. I have a fun tool that just came out called the decision diagnostic. So it helps you understand if you have a subconscious decision to make that you might be putting off that could accelerate your current situation. So those will be on my social platforms very soon. And shoot me a DM anytime. I love brainstorming. I love talking to people about their next steps. I do a lot of clarity sessions with people to help them get their plan for next steps. So I would be honored to have a chat if you want to talk through your next step to get from clinical medicine into the entrepreneur game into that next level.
Yeah, yeah. And don't we all need to leverage both, those unpaid mentors in our lives, but also go out and say, hey, you do this for a living, and I am facing this decision or considering making this change. Get some guidance, be strategic and intentional because it's just faster and easier. And you'll feel better about the decision you're making with some outside counsel than if you just wing it. Because a lot of people are out there just winging it, and that's fine, but it's not the single best way to make that choice.
Yes, for sure. For sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time and wisdom with us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tracy. It's fun.
Okay, can we just take a collective breath for a second? Because this conversation didn't just teach, it shifted something. And I want to tell you what I'm taking with me because I have a feeling that you felt it too. First, this idea of putting things on simmer instead of trying to do everything at a rolling boil all at once. What a game changer. Because how many of us are out here trying to grow everything at once? Our clinical careers, our side gigs, our families, our health, our relationships, and then wondering why we feel stretched so thin. What Kasey reminded me is that intentional growth means deciding what gets your energy right now, what gets maintenance, and what gets turned down or condensed or compressed on purpose. Not forever, but for this season right now. And that level of clarity, that's where momentum comes from. Second, what has two thumbs and is adding two books to her Amazon cart, or more specifically, checking to see if the library has them in stock? This girl. Because who, not how, and 10x is easier than 2x. Why aren't we reading these things? It's not just about a mindset shift, it's a complete rewiring of how we approach our own personal and professional development and growth. Not how can I do more? How can I learn how to do that? But who can I bring into this with me? Who can I learn from, partner with? Who can take this off my plate? Who can grow with me? And probably the most important one, who is already where I want to go and can help me get there faster? Who can mentor me and advise me in this space? And then this bigger vision of possibility that she painted of a life that's not only about working less or escaping burnout, but a life rooted in fulfillment, in contribution, and in philanthropy. Not someday, not after I finally make it, after I start or scale the business, but as a natural byproduct of building something intentionally. Because I think so many of us have been sold this idea that we just have to hang on and survive medicine until someone offers us the opportunity to retire. When in reality, we can redesign it. We can build something alongside it, beyond it, and eventually instead of it, where we're not just earning, we're choosing how we spend our time, make an impact, and give back. And if there's one thread for me that ties this all together, it's this. It's not about doing more or holding on or white knuckling it or suffering through. It's about building the right who around you. Your mentors, peers, team, your loved ones, and the support system that you have in business and at home. The people who challenge you, stretch you, support you, and remind you what's possible when you sometimes forget yourself. So here's what I want you to do next. Don't just listen to this episode and move on. Listen back again. Take some time and ask yourself, what am I trying to keep at a full boil that actually needs to simmer right now? What's one who that I need to add to my life or business? And what would it look like to start building towards a life that feels as good as it looks? Because this is how we stop surviving our careers and start designing the next one. That's all for today. This PA is out.